truly delighted to be here. Thank you very, very much for having me this morning. I'm Hannah. I founded, for better or worse, Bold Tendencies, which is based in Peckham, southeast London, a real land of possibility. And I think what I'm going to talk about today is when you start with absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, but an enormous feeling of possibility, what are the principles and ideas that can come to govern the work that you do? So if you'll bear with me, the building that has welcomed us for such a long time now, 12 years ago, quite by chance, I stumbled across this very tall, very wide, very long building that was built in the late 80s for as a multi-story car park to service a supermarket that strangely moved in and then moved out within 10 years. And of course, the building fell into underuse and then disuse and eventually was closed for any kind of use. Needless to say, with a very tall building, you have the most wonderful, spectacular views from the top, not just north to the rest of the city, but in fact 360 degrees all around. And it's this building that's really come since 2007 to allow us, with its welcome and its generosity, to do the work that we've come to do there, with its tallness, its wideness, its length, and its brutal structure, and of course those fantastic views which are inspiring to all sorts of people. But in particular, I was very interested in the idea at the time that there was no real opportunities for younger artists or artists who hadn't had an opportunity before to make work at scale that could be shown to the public. There are, of course, these major commissions in London, like the Turbine Hall or the Duveen Commission in Tate Britain, the Fourth Plinth, which you may know in Trafalgar Square, but there weren't really so many other opportunities. And so, coming from the world of visual art in the first instance, I thought to myself, well, could we take on this space and offer it up as an opportunity for artists to make new work? And so there began our commissioning program in 2007. What do I mean by commissioning? I do not mean curating, and I'm far from a curator. London and the world are filled with the most brilliant curators, and I am not one of them. And so we decided that what we would try to do through our commissioning program was financially, intellectually, and logistically support artists to make progressive and ambitious new work for this site. And so we went on to, since that moment, to commission almost, this year we will commission our 100th work. And as you can see on the slides, there are all sorts of types of work that we've been able to show on the site, and that's really down to the great vision, ingenuity, and commitment of the many, many artists and those who have worked on the projects with us. You can see here Anthea Hamilton, very large-scale work. I think one of her first large-scale works, James Bridle, the great technologist, his fantastic project on surveillance called The Right to Flight, very small scale but very, very poignant work called Bristow by Adèle Abdessimed, and a very, very early work by Camille Henrot. All these artists and many, many others gone on to do fantastic work, and we were thrilled to have the chance to work with them very early on. Some other examples to show you the scope and scale that's possible on the site. And again, talking about being welcome, I think that the site has been extraordinarily generous in terms of what, and permissive in terms of what's been able to happen there. Here you see Sterling Ruby, great American artist, his Black Stove, sitting in Derek Jarman garden that we worked on with the late Derek Jarman's foundation. Major work by Richard Wentworth, I think his largest ever work, this beautiful serpentine reflective silver line that covers now permanently the whole site, appropriately titled Agora, through to Simon Wybray's very large-scale love letter, which painting the original staircase from top to bottom. So this is a 10-story staircase called "Hi Boo, I Love You," a love letter to his fiancée at the time. And it's been a strange project because it's gone on for all sorts of reasons to acquire a character all of its own. And this, again, like Richard's work, we keep permanently on the site. So, progress, not practice. Work, like the work we were able to do, is very, very addictive. And what's addictive about it is not being addicted to success or failure, but being addicted to the progress itself, as far as I'm concerned. And so deep as we were in the world of sculpture, we thought to ourselves, what else, what other disciplines might we be able to work with where we could apply this commissioning idea and find ourselves being helpful or useful, or to contribute something that wasn't already being done in the city. And of course, naturally, one ends up hook, line, and sinker in the world of classical music. So in terms of classical music, that clip just shows you where we started, because we thought if we want to start really with something truly ambitious in this world, what will we do? Well, we'll do The Rite of Spring, this very, very radical piece of music. And we thought, you know, in order to disprove all the people that said it will never work because the acoustics are terrible, it'll never work because nobody wants to hear classical music in a car park, it'll never work, it'll never work, it'll never work. I mean, that is the refrain that has accompanied us throughout the past decade. But in any case, since 2011, we have managed to put on what I have no query in my mind about, a world-class program of classical music in the lower level, below the top floor of the car park, both orchestral scale music and chamber music. And as a testament to the quality, in 2 consecutive years, we were invited by the BBC Proms, the great festival of classical music, not only to participate in their programme, but that they would put aside the Royal Albert Hall and come to the car park concert hall. And there we were able, through their support, to perform some of the great, great works of American minimalism, which I have to say, together with many other moments in this car park, has brought to me some of the great moments to date. Not to sit still with the world of classical music, we moved into the world of opera. If I thought classical music was difficult to do, opera is a whole other ball game. But we have started last year with great commitment to that, working with this brilliant young director, Polly Graham from Welsh National Opera. We also moved into the world of dance, and through the support of Sadler's Wells in London, we were able to start to bring some of the world's greatest choreographers to the car park. And again, going back to the generosity and the permissiveness of the space, you can see here again how the car park site can be completely reconfigured, proving that, of course, you don't always need to have a bespoke, custom-built auditorium, stage, and so on. We have even found ourselves in worlds yet to be defined in terms of commissioning. Like this last year, we worked with, on the final night of the program, we worked with Es Devlin and the great Italian physicist Carlo Rovelli and the actor Benedict Cumberbatch to put on this, what I would describe as a monumental act of mediated reading, I suppose, without going over the top. That began a whole other world of public work that we are continuing in our commitment to. Architecture has been a very, very interesting thing that we've gotten involved with as well in terms of commissioning. Why did we start commissioning architecture? Well, simply because we needed to plug into this very, very hostile environment. We needed to think, how do we perhaps encourage more people to come here, and how do we, once they're here, how do we make them stay longer? Well, to look after them, make them feel welcome. And so we began by commissioning in 2009. On the top right here, you can see Frank's Cafe, which is, has come to be a great, great annual part of the program, providing a place for people to sit down, a place for people to have a great drink, and very importantly, the revenue that has come from the cafe has given us a significant autonomy in terms of being able to keep ticket prices for classical music, opera, etc., between £5 and £10, which in London undercuts all other ticket prices unless you make something completely free. Many of the things we do are also free and are also subsidised by our own revenue streams. Alongside all of the work that we do and all of the progress that we make, of course, you know, one starts to think about the opportunities that come with that. And it's not just about doing a wonderful program, having a great time. It's about saying, in the richness of all of the ideas that are brought here by these great artists and creative people, how can we mobilize these ideas and make them useful in terms of education, community, and play? And instead of making more programs, which is one way of doing things in terms of addressing these subjects, we decided that we would look rather at tool making. How could we make some tools that would be useful to the artists, to the audiences, and to the workforce? And two of these we've tested, and we've been lucky enough to test and demonstrate all sorts of different ideas on the site. My Museum is a museum run by primary school-aged children, all the exhibits by them, the design, the content, the texts, even the branding of the museum itself is by the kids who run it. And that's one tool that we've been working on for quite some years now. The second project that we're very, very proud of is a project that really commits to working and learning alongside each other. There are, as we all know, there are significant barriers to accessing careers in culture and creative industries around the world, but in London it's very, very extreme at times. And so we set up something called the Art Trainee Programme, which is a programme for young people interested in pursuing a career, not necessarily in being an artist or being a curator, but in all the other aspects of the cultural and creative worlds. And we provide a working and learning experience on site alongside each other. All of this leads on to another very important point, which really comes out of a lot of conversations I've had with Richard Wentworth, with his large agora, which is the kind of, as he describes it, the breadbasket into which everything else can be placed on the rooftop. And from my point of view, I've come to realize or think that, you know, cultural establishments, they belong to everybody, and public spirit is as important as public space. And we have spent a lot of time in the last few years really trying to understand the civic character of our site and the needs of ambitions of all those involved with it. We have had many visitors come over the threshold, and that's the important thing, stepping into the site. And then it's the responsibility of the organisation beyond that to create something that is as memorable, as useful, and as good as possible and as progressive as possible for all of those people who are generous enough to come and see us. And last summer, we had our best ever summer, and we had, in 18 weeks, 155,000 people visited the site. And for whatever reason they came, you know, there's a lot to do there, but from my point of view, what matters is that they came as they were, and they hopefully made enough memories to think that they might come back again, and that's how the audience grows and changes over time. In 2017, the site, which is owned by Peckham Town Council, like many, many sites, not just in London, but all over the world, these sites are problematic because, of course, you have the great good fortune to do something wonderful and exciting in them, and then, of course, the value of the site changes and it's needed for something different and it gets taken away from you. And in 2017, we thought to ourselves, you know, our time is up. We need to know when the end is coming. And so I asked the council, you know, when is the end, you know, so I can prepare myself, so we can celebrate rather than commiserate. And the answer was the end would be in three to 4 years' time. And we said, fine, we will escalate the programming and we will do the best we can do for the longest time we can, and then we will leave and do something else. We will think what else we can do in the city. There was a U-turn on that decision by the council, and they offered us the possibility of a long-term lease. And at first, I thought to myself, you know, I don't want this. The organisation doesn't need this. It has a beginning and an end, and that should be that, and we need to go on and do something else. We didn't take that decision. We chose the opposite route, which was to commit to the permanence. And why did we commit to the permanence? Well, from a desire to protect public space in a city where, frankly, it's becoming increasingly endangered. When we didn't have that permanent scenario, I used to always talk to people about the principle of permanence being upheld in an impermanent situation. And of course, now I can't talk about that principle anymore. So I've begun to think more and more about a principle more of provision, because it strikes me that that's actually really what we've been trying to do since the beginning, is to provide something, to provide it better, to provide it for longer, and to provide it in a way that is always, always in a state of progress. And we've been thinking a lot about how we take everything we've learned and everything we haven't learned yet, and all the success and failure, and what sorts of provisions might we try to do beyond just what Bold Tendencies does. We ended up with 3 projects which we're working on at the moment. One is the Studio Stack, which is a major project to build vertical, high-rise studio spaces, highly affordable, undercutting all rent situations in London for artists, with very, very interesting public space, top, middle, and bottom. A Provision Pavilion in Venice, which is a project to create new infrastructure during the time of the Biennale, both of architecture and art in Venice. And then we're very, very committed to our 2019 programme. And that's all from me.